I was deep in it, gaming on Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7. Unfolding the screen made it twice as big and so immersive, I kinda lost myself. Might have trolled a little too close to the sun. Someone in the chat told me to touch grass, so I took my Z Fold 7 outside and kept playing. Still won, got a tan, and a nice little reset. Powerful processor, realistic graphics, you stay locked in, streak stays alive. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
Quiet Riot.
Welcome to Quiet Riot Midnight Mass. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
This is a special that we're recording for you after, first of all, Rayner resigned from government in the morning, and then what followed was a big reshuffle, actually, of top positions. And we thought we would separate that out from what we had planned to do for Sunday school and do it in a very quiet, rioty fashion in two parts. Give you our instant reaction tonight, then tackle what we were planning to tackle on Sunday school, as we had promised, and then we can deal with more junior appointment and slightly more settled reflections, I guess, of what went on next week's midweek episode.
We wanted to bring you our immediate take on today's news, but fear not, that doesn't mean we're not doing Sunday school as usual. We are, and we're going to be covering all of the other news, like the arrest of Graham Linehan and the most egregious and ear-shattering parts of the Reform Party conference.
Right, so without delay, let's get into the discussion of Rayner's departure and the cabinet reshuffle that followed it.
Quiet Riot.
Right, so they got her, basically.
They did.
The hysteria that dominated every front page for 2 days. Laurie Magnus gave his verdict. It was, I thought, unusually warm.
Well, it was much warmer and sympathetic than when he wrote about Nadim Zahawi a couple of years ago, if you remember, also over tax arrangements.
Yeah.
I thought he was much more sympathetic to the situation Rayner found herself in and what she tried to do and fallen short of than with him. So, you know, they are not equal and the same in terms of their crimes in the eyes of Laurie Magnus.
What really popped out at you from his letter and Angela Rayner's resignation letter and Starmer's response, that little trio of exchanges?
Yeah, so there was a briefing that she was going to resign before she did, and that was before we knew that Magnus had given Starmer the report. So for a little while, there was all the rumours circulating that she was about to resign. And therefore, people were expecting and anticipating that the verdict to probably be more damning, actually, than it was in the end. And there was, you know, some people thinking, well, you know, is he going to just sack her? Is he going to read the report and then say, you've got to go? Clearly, she said, look, I'll go, and here's my resignation. And look, all of the words of exchange were quite tender. Starmer does a handwritten note to her. And I believe pretty clearly this was choreographed to leave the door open for her return. That's the main thing I took from that exchange. I don't know if yours was different.
No, I think I agree. And I think I can see how exactly she will come back. And, you know, I love a prediction, me. I think she will take some sort of limited project or role, either to do with, let's say, the upcoming elections or to do with reforming some internal piece of party machinery or reforming some bit of government, maybe planning regulations. You know, housing is her big passion. So I could see her after a reasonable interval, say in a year's time, I could see Keir Starmer saying, I have asked Angela Rayner to lead a team that will get a grip on the cladding situation, which is still ongoing.
I wonder if housing now might just be quite a difficult one for her, given that it was a housing issue related to tax that's caused her the problem. But I agree with your substantive point
Yeah.
entirely.
I
She
mean, I
is a
think if it's
huge.
something discreet, like the issue of cladding, for instance, I
Then that
don't.
might be
Yeah, I think that's okay.
And she is a talent, she is a communicator, and she's got a bloody good story to tell, and she is unafraid to call things out as she sees them. There is an authenticity to her that is lacking amongst many of the
Hmm.
top
Hmm.
team around Summer. So they'll miss her from that perspective, and the reaction from, I wouldn't necessarily say the left of Labour, but certainly the soft left of Labour has been one of absolute despair today. They are really gutted for her and for themselves to be losing a figure like her, who really was just much more relatable as a human being, even up to and including this issue. We talked about it on the show earlier in the week, how bloody complicated the tax system is, particularly if you're not a millionaire surrounded by advisors left, right, and centre who's grown up in a culture of it where your mum and dad probably managed their affairs through, efficient, as they call it, tax vehicles. So I think that humanity is what people resonated with and will be feeling the loss of as we sort of enter this new era of the
Yeah.
government.
But I don't get the sense that she was pushed out. I get the sense of genuine warmth between her and Starmer, actually. Whatever happens down the line, they might be pitted as political rivals in months to come. But what I sensed right now was good communication, and they seem to be on the same page. I don't get the sense that this was a left of Labour thing, a right of Labour thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think what he is going to be acutely aware of, and we'll come on and talk to the appointments he's made subsequently in a while, is that this was loaded with misogyny and classism.
Yeah, yeah.
And people often talk about the fact that, he needed her to be that kind of much more authentic, traditional working class Labour voice, despite himself having a very similar, class background.
Mm.
And frankly, many of the cabinet, state school educated and on of the ilk that we've seen most of the time in our cabinets in our lifetime. But I think he did feel, as I think you and I both did, that the misogyny and classism around this was acute. Why don't we talk a bit about that? The thing that led to this and her interview with Beth Rigby, the divorce and the nesting arrangements. Maybe we haven't really aired that between us quite enough.
I mean, I think that one of the principal impressions that I took away from that was that if there can be such a thing as a good divorce, what a good divorce this was, and how plainly dedicated to the co-parenting and welfare of their children both parties were. And I don't think that's something that was picked up particularly by anyone. And I think that's a shame, actually, because in all the learning around this was really a key bit of it to see that, not everyone who parts ways hate each other, and that there is an alternative to dividing into two households and the children going back and forth. This idea of a nesting arrangement where the family home remains the family home, and it's the separated parents that move back and forth. And I would love that to get a little bit more attention.
It certainly sounded, and of course you never know unless you're actually in the
Of course.
relationship and all of that, but it certainly sounds like both parties have approached this in the most dignified way possible. And as you say, keeping children at the forefront of it. And in particular, the child with a disability and a lifelong condition, which, as Ed Davies said, as a parent of a disabled child, your biggest fear is what happens to that child when you're no longer
When
on
you're
this
gone.
earth.
Absolutely.
And the pressures that it will put on your other children and all of that. And this is clearly a couple completely dedicated to doing as best as they can for their children's future.
The atmospherics around it were kind of made very, very doubly clear to me when I went on to X, defended Rayner as I had in other social media, and the responses I got there were just so violent, so misogynistic, I had to actually lock my account. Like the number of random letter, random number blue tick bots with 80 followers each coming to say that she's a slag, she's a slapper, abusive terms that only apply to women were rolled out, that she was a bad mother, that she had stolen money out of her child's trust, and like all kinds of bollocks. And as a response to me saying that there is a fair amount of misogyny around there, to get the response that basically goes, there's no misogyny here, she's a slapper, is, is sort of QED. As far as I'm concerned, Angela Rayner is a really solid person. We need more of her in politics, not fewer of her in politics. She will come back. I hope that she will come back, although I don't know why she would want to. And I think one of the risks is the Jacinda Ardern thing, that she now goes off, has a bit of a quiet time, and then goes, oh God, why would I ever want to put myself through that again? And is lost by default, as it were.
And I think we also need to think today of the people that have lost their jobs who aren't high profile.
Of course.
There will be a whole team around Angela who've supported her and worked with her and done the late night shifts and the difficult briefings. And, they will all now be wondering where their futures lie, their careers. This is never just about the people whose names and faces are on the front pages. It is about some really decent, hardworking advisors that now will find themselves packing up their desk.
Absolutely. And I guess to put things in context, take us back like 4 or 5 years ago to where a much more damning verdict was rendered by the ethics and standards watchdog against someone like Priti Patel, and Johnson decided that he was just going to ignore it, leading to the actual Ethics and Standards Commissioner having to resign. And sort of then another one resigned, and then a new one wasn't appointed for years. And where inquiries into conduct of ministers were used as active tools for kicking the can down the road and saying, I can't comment on this because there's an ongoing investigation. You'll have to wait for the result months later. So fast forward to now, what happened now? She applied to lift the confidentiality order from the court. All the information was handed to the Commissioner for Ministerial Interests, and within 48 hours, he had given his verdict, and his verdict, as soft and equivocal as it was, it resulted in a breach of the ministerial code being found, and the person involved just went. So, let's put things in perspective a little bit.
And put it in the perspective of previous Labour ministers that have gone. So the notable one being Tulip Siddiq, who obviously had this anti-corruption investigation and links to the Bangladeshi government hanging over her head. She remained in post for quite a long time before eventually resigning. I think it was quite a few months actually. So as a government, they seem to be learning, okay, when something bad happens, which it inevitably will from time to time, we've got to move much more quickly.
Quiet Riot. Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contrast. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Quiet Riot.
Right, so this then turned into quite a major reshuffle that took absolutely everyone in the Westminster Village by surprise, I think. I mean, we'd all heard some rumors about individual appointments, but I don't think anyone expected that the button was going to be pressed on this radical reset of the top team. It felt like the first time this government had been on the front foot. It felt like the first time this government decided to take the news agenda by the scruff of the neck and say, no, you're not going to talk about Farage's speech. You're not going to talk endlessly about Rayner's resignation. Here's what you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about how decisively, quickly, efficiently, and professionally this government has used this as an opportunity to reshape itself. What do you think?
Well, I think it is interesting that the week began with government briefing. This is a reset. This is how we're going to be doing things from now on. We're going to be really focusing on delivery. And of course, we had Darren Jones being moved out of the Treasury into number 10, sitting very closely to Starmer around the cabinet table as his kind of chief fixer. We were being told that, we're starting the firing gun now. Of course, the issue was with Rayner going that she held so many jobs. She was the deputy prime minister. She was the minister heading up the whole of the Department for Housing, Communities and Local Government, and other titles too. So her going could never be a like-for-like replacement and promoting one person and then backfilling that role with somebody who didn't currently have a job. It was always going to trigger something much bigger. And boy, has it. And of course, we now have a situation where, and this is to be applauded by anyone and everyone who cares about equality, the three big offices of state, other than Prime Minister, Chancellor, Foreign Secretary, and Home Secretary, are now all women. Rachel Reeves stays put. Yvette gets moved into Foreign Secretary, and Shabana Mahmood from Justice into Home Secretary. So it is a really huge change right at the top there, and one that flanks the male Prime Minister with three very strong women.
For the first time ever, I think I'm right
For the first time ever.
Okay, so you touched on some of the big appointments there. Who do we think is a promotion? Who do we think is a demotion? Like what grabbed you? And does this have the flavor of warring party factions, or does it have a different flavor?
Well, that will depend on who you speak to. So quite a lot of people on the soft left and sort of maybe more Brownite, if that isn't too outdated a concept of a faction within Labour, are telling me this is a Blairite takeover, for sure. But when you really analyse who's been moved, okay, Darren Jones probably would fit the stereotype of Blairite, but that had already happened. I don't know that you can call Yvette and Shabana Blairite in that regard. Pat McFadden definitely is, and he's been moved into this sort of new role. Bit of a sideways move, I would say. I wouldn't necessarily call that a promotion. He's taking on Liz Kendall's old brief of work and pensions, but with an added dose, we understand, of the Department for Education with skills moving over to now sit within work and pensions. So definitely a big role, even if it isn't necessarily a promotion. I think that Lammy is a demotion from Foreign Office to Justice, but has obviously been bought off with being made Deputy Prime Minister. So one could sort of say, well, not necessarily a change in status. Again, a bit of a sideways move. Definitely a big promotion for Douglas Alexander from the Department of Trade as a junior minister to be Secretary of State for Scotland, and therefore a total demotion for Ian Murray, who leaves cabinet entirely. And while on paper, and Douglas Alexander definitely a Blairite, that sounds like a promotion to Secretary of State, it might arguably be conceived as a slightly smaller role, even though it sounds grander because the job at Trade was so huge. Johnny Reynolds has been moved out of the Secretary of State for Business and Trade and into Chief Whip. Again, I'm not sure about that one because I think Johnny was a good egg. I thought he'd done a pretty decent job there. He certainly handled the steelworks crisis very well. I don't think he'd made a wrong move, but you had to make space for Peter Kyle, who I think probably has had a promotion. He's moving over from DSIT to head up Business and Trade. So I think on balance, the only sort of major demotions have been for Lucy Powell, who's out completely, was Leader of the Commons, Ian Murray out of Secretary of State, and of course Angela. The rest are a kind of a mixture of sideways moves / promotions.
Hold on. Liz Kendall is a demotion.
Yes, and deservedly so, and should have been even more.
But that is a demotion, right?
Yeah, so she's gone to basically, I think probably like head of AI.
Yeah.
So she's taking on science and tech from
Yeah, I
Peter
mean, a
Bile.
nice role. It's interesting. I see the Lammy move slightly differently because he's forged such a good relationship with J.D. Vance. I think making him deputy prime minister is a way of preserving
Oh,
that. It
sure. And
kind of makes him the opposite number to J.D. Vance.
he
So,
couldn't have got it without that either.
yeah.
And
So-
he'll be great at the dispatch box when he has to stand in for Starmer. I'm sure of it.
Absolutely,
He's a
which-
lawyer. He's a debater. He's a great orator.
He's
I
one
think
of the greatest ones for thinking on
they've
his
got.
feet in the
Mm.
House of Commons, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it really is key preserving that relationship with J.D. Vance. So by moving him there, it almost takes that out of Foreign Office and makes it the deputy prime ministers, because he's more of an opposite number to J.D. Vance. And also, I think just from what I'm hearing a little bit privately from contacts who are relatively close to Lammy, I think also it gives him a bit more of an opportunity to travel a little bit less and spend a bit more time with his family, because I think that jet-setting role, as glamorous as it is
Must be
maybe not
knackering.
the most, it is knackering and maybe not the most natural one for someone that really likes home and family and cooking. And, I mean,
Church and yeah.
so much had been taken out of David Lammy's life that I think is quite important for him. So I think that's a really reasonable compromise, actually, to give him all those other things. And I think it puts him in a very good position for a possible leadership bid in the future, which is also quite interesting. You see, I get what you're saying. There's definitely a Blairite flavor to this shake-up, but there's also a kind of competence flavor to it. Like, you could also look at all of those appointments and you will see, with very few exceptions, people who have done well being either rewarded or, sideways moved to something that needs the attention of someone that has a better record for getting a grip. Or you could look at the demotions and think these are the people who haven't really done it in that position, especially when it comes to managing to get legislation through Parliament. I think people who have proposed legislation and then ended up in big trouble trying to get it through Parliament have been particularly punished.
4%.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think very notable, of course, is that the briefings that we had several months ago about people like Bridget Phillipson and, of course, Lisa Nandy, chief among them,
And
no
Rachel
change.
Reeves.
They stay put. I think he could not afford to lose both Rachel and Angela in the same week.
For sure.
And she's well on her way to, finalizing the ink on the budget in a few weeks' time.
Quiet, riot.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Quiet, riot.
What do you think the appointments point to in terms of future direction, I guess? What are the hints in there?
That's a really good question, because as we see, there isn't any major change in terms of new people being brought in. It's mostly the existing people doing a different job, with the exception of Emma Reynolds, who has now been promoted to DEFRA. It's quite early to say. I have seen a lot of people online talking about the appointment of Shabana Mahmood to Home Secretary. And they're sort of likening it to a lot of what the Tories did in particular over the last couple of governments by putting a person of colour into a role where you have to be, or, they choose to be, taking a harder line on immigrants and immigration, etc. There is certainly a lot of chatter about that being one of these kinds of moves. And I
I mean,
very much
she's
hope
quite
it is not.
hardline in
She is. She's
many
a tough
ways.
cookie. And
She's
we've had people like, reform members like Monty, Tim Montgomery and others sort of saying, oh, she's dangerous. She's one to watch if we're for those of us on the right, because she'll be bloody good at this job. So certainly the right of British politics are frightened of her being in that role.
And of course, there's been just an absolute tsunami, an onslaught of racism and Islamophobia in response
Disgusting.
to that.
I mean, unreal. My timeline got filled with awful comments.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if now the MAGA contingent across the ocean pick that up and make her and Sadiq Khan a sort of duo that proves Sharia law is now the norm in the UK, etc., etc.
Well,
all that
they need a new
bullshit.
victim. They've got rid of Angela. Now they've got to move on to their next.
So I hope she's prepared for a very, very tough time, because I think she's going to get a very tough time. But I get the impression that she's quite a, solidly metal politician. But we shall see. The market reaction I found very interesting.
Yep, tell us.
UK 30-year gilts are now at 5.50.
From
5.75, so 25-point drop in the last 24 hours, back to lower than they were at the start of the week, when everyone started rending their garments about UK borrowing costs being at their highest level ever, and how this was going to make life incredibly difficult for Rachel Reeves. I see none of the same accounts talking about the significant drop today of those gilt rates, and how that actually might make Rachel Reeves' life a little bit easier when it comes to the budget. And maybe that's what they were waiting for before they asked for the OBR forecast, before they gave that 10-week warning to the OBR. And similarly, pound sterling is back at the levels almost exactly where it was at the start of the week. Again, big hoo-ha about the drop of sterling and how dramatic it was. Well, it's risen just as dramatically and is back to where it was. So that's worth mentioning, because I don't think it will get mentioned anywhere fucking else.
We should also talk about her resignation, Angela Rayner's resignation, not just from her government role, but also as the directly elected deputy leader of the party. We'll go into who could be in the running for it and who they ought to choose in a bit. I've taken a look at the rule book, and the guidance on what happens if deputy leadership gets vacated while the party is in power is this: the cabinet may, in consultation with the NEC, appoint one of its members to serve as deputy leader until the next party conference. The cabinet may alternatively leave the post vacant until a ballot under these rules can be carried out. Now, reports at the time of recording are that the election for deputy leader will happen after the party conference, but before the budget. So then I went looking at precedent, and the one that everyone's going to use is 2007, which is the last time a vacancy arose while Labour was in government. This is when
Prescott
Brown comes. He did, yes. Brown comes in as PM. Prescott, loyal to Blair, stands down, and Harriet Harman eventually wins in the final round against former Quiet Riot guest Alan Johnson. So I'm afraid that doesn't bode well for Emily Thornberry, Dawn Butler, Andrew Lewin, or Marsha de Cordova, who have all been on our show. Sorry, guys. And notably, Gordon Brown did not then appoint her as Deputy Prime Minister, but left the role vacant. So candidates have to get a minimum number of MPs to back them before it then goes to the membership. But back in 2007, there were moves to try and avoid that and sort of get consensus behind one candidate from amongst the PLP to save the party a couple of million. And this was a decade ago that it would cost to do an all-member ballot. I don't know what the cost would be today. Then there were sort of people saying, well, if he's appointed Lamy as deputy PM, that's going to be a stitch up for deputy leader. If Lamy then runs for that, because it'll be framed as whether to confirm his appointment or rebel.
I mean, the two don't have to go
They
hand
do
in
not
hand.
have to. They do not. And if you have lost a brilliant working class woman with flaming red hair as deputy leader of the party, then surely Lou Hay is the obvious candidate.
Yeah, I think Lou
to
Hay
step forward and
is
fill
an
her
obvious
shoes.
candidate. I think that's a really good shout. I do think, despite her association with this podcast, I also do think Dawn Butler
So do I.
would
She'd be
do
brilliant.
really, really well in that role and with a membership. So I think
Dawn is great with the party. Like, I've been to...
both those women could win
I agree.
handsomely if they decided to go for that. Are you surprised that Emily Thornberry is still out in the cold with various appointments going begging?
I'm disappointed, but not surprised. She's brilliant. She is easily one of their better communicators. She knows her onions. She's been around long enough to know how to outfox all the people that you need to when you've got a big job. I think they're poorer for it, but my God, she's a brilliant select committee chair. And, on a personal level, I wish her all the best in whatever she chooses to do. And I think she'd be a brilliant deputy leader as well. But, as things stand, I do think the party is poorer for not using her more effectively.
Yeah, I have to say, looking at the slate of what had become available, I would have thought Chief Whip would have suited Thornberry very well, but she can get those boys in line. Right, so anything else? Any of the slightly more, what do we think of Reid going, I think, from DEFRA to housing, and then Emma Reynolds goes into DEFRA, right?
Yep. Yeah, so Emma, fantastic career heading up City UK, which is one of the trade bodies for the finance sector, before winning, her MP seat last year. Immediately sort of gets parachuted in to a Treasury job now, heading up an entire department. So, good on her, highly competent person. She has had a couple of really poor media performances where she was, ill-equipped to answer some of the questions that were leveled at her on LBC. However, she is a very, very competent manager, and I'm sure she'll run it well. We've got a big load of stuff coming at us with DEFRA in the next few years, because we're trying to get that agri deal with the EU. So she's going to be taking on all of that. That intersects hugely with Northern Ireland. So she's going to have to work really closely with Hilary Benn on all of that. Good luck to her. I think she'll be very, very effective. Steve Reid, I don't know as well, I would say, as some of the others. A very, very nice man. From the few interactions I've had with him. And yeah, I mean, I can, sort of see him picking up the mantle really well on housing. He's definitely got kind of good, I would say, soft left credentials when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And certainly is not going to, be ill-equipped to do that job. But I'm not so familiar with his background and where his interests lie. But it is clearly a demotion for him. But an incredibly important job to deliver a mission that Angela really picked up and ran with, and to get all of the homes built that we know need to. And again, that is intrinsically linked to issues like growth, like our deal with the EU, freedom of movement-esque stuff for builders. We're going to need them to come and help us meet that housing target if it's to come off.
Yeah.
And the planning and infrastructure bill is, going through and needs somebody to steer it in the right direction.
Now, two things to finish. The first is my tingly instinct from the changes that have been made is that the Pat McFadden move means that I think with a budget coming up, before the end of the year, after the budget and before the end of the year, I think the government is going to have another go at welfare reform. It seems to me that bringing skills into DWP is a signal that what was got wrong last time was that it was all stick, no carrot, that this idea of retooling, reskilling people, getting people into jobs wasn't giving enough emphasis. The emphasis was all on savings, and that's where it went horribly wrong. So, like I said, my instinct tells me that Pat McFadden move is to put the safest possible pair of hands in place and give them all the bits of the portfolio that they need to have another go at welfare reform before the end of the year. And the last thing I wanted to ask you, because I really don't have an amazingly good radar on this, and yours is exceptional. Party people tend to see things in terms of left of the Labour Party, right of the Labour Party, or whatever. And this will be seen as a slight move to maybe to the right of the Labour Party. But Blairite is not the same as Blue Labour in my mind. They are two quite distinct functions with quite different philosophical takes. So what does that mean for Blue Labour? What does that mean for people like McSweeney? Would he be feeling more secure in his position tonight or less so?
I suspect that the deal that has been done is Blue Labour gets to win on the social issues and the Blairites get to win on economic issues.
Right.
So I think we will see more of a pro-business, let's get the business community back on board with everything that we're trying to achieve here. We've annoyed them with employer NICs, sluggish growth, slow movement on the EU. Let's supercharge all of that stuff while holding the line on being pretty tough on social issues, not least of all immigration.
Fascinating. Thank you, Naomi. I found this incredibly useful, actually, just being able to bounce things off you and go through the day's events. As we said, we will return to this with slightly more settled reflections, especially taking in the more junior appointments, because sometimes I think they're very important in how a department shapes up. For instance, who will take the point on EU negotiations? Will it still be the same person, or will that be moved around?
Rashana Ali, of course, who resigned what feels like ages ago, was less than a month ago, from that role of Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Homelessness. That hasn't yet been filled and had been left vacant. So, we've got all sorts of issues around housing that will fall out from all of this. And as you say, many junior positions that could all get shuffled around. So we'll try and keep it as close an eye on it as we can and bring you our thoughts next week.
But, whatever one thinks of the appointments themselves and what they might signify, today was the first time I felt like there was a government here that understood the news cycle and that sort of shoved Nigel Farage's big conference speech to end now in other news, and took the news agenda more proactively from the scruff of the neck and imposed itself, as a government, I think, almost always ought to, and certainly can. So thanks to everyone who tuned in, and thanks to you, Naomi.
And we hope, everybody at home, that you found that this was helpful in navigating all of these latest developments. And remember, you can back us over at ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod.
As promised, we'll be back on Sunday to delve into everything else that's been going on, from Dory's defecting to reform, Farage's speech, his troubles in the States, his troubles with the taxman, and the war erupting over Linian's arrest.
But for now, count some sheep, get some shut-eye, and nod off in the knowledge that here at Quiet Riot HQ, we love you very much.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.